My sermon this morning is going to be hard. It's going to be hard for me to give and probably hard to hear. And I'm aware of the fact that we have a range of ages here, and at the same time, in an appropriate way, I want to talk about something that's incredibly difficult and incredibly disturbing. And the overall theme has to do with intentions. What are people's intentions? The Torah distinguishes when it comes to intentions, describes in this morning's parasha that a person can actually kill someone but not have had the intention, the premeditation to end that person's life. If it takes place not by design, the Torah says, "Va'asher lo tada ve'elohim ina li'ado," and maybe even by an act of God, "V'samti lecha makom asher yanu shama," the person is given a place to go to so that that person can avoid being on the receiving end, perhaps, of revenge. But then the Torah says, "V'chi yazid ish al re'ehu lehorgo ba'armav," one person schemes against the other. If the intention is to kill, me'im mis b'chi tikachenu lamut, you take that person from my altar to put that person to death. Very striking. Me'im mis b'chi, the word sanctuary comes from a place where people would go in order to escape consequences. And the Torah says if your intentions are murderous, then there is no escaping accountability. We all witnessed recently a scene that speaks clearly about intentions. 1.5 years after Hamas terrorists and their supporters murdered and violated and took captive as many Israeli Jews as they could, and others as well, almost 1.5 years after we now know that they, by hand, murdered an infant and a toddler, we witnessed a scene of men and women and children standing around and singing and dancing and celebrating the return of the coffins containing these children and an elderly peace activist and someone who was supposed to be their mother and at the time was not even the toddler's mother. We witnessed all of this, and it makes very clear what the intentions are. The intention is and has been to maim and to murder and to mock and to celebrate. And I hate to use this phrase because it is such a perversion of a phrase that means so much to us. But for the people who were there, the intention is to ensure that that barbarity continue lidor vador, to make sure that subsequent generations are going to internalize this behavior, internalize these intentions, and make the behavior and the intentions their own. There can be no doubt at this point, if there ever was a doubt, the intentions are not resistance. The intentions are not to create a better outcome for the Palestinian people. If that were the intention, they would not have murdered an octogenarian who devoted his life to trying to find rapprochement and peace with the Palestinian people. They would not have murdered an elderly man who literally drove to the border of Gaza with his wife again and again to help drive Gazan children to hospitals to receive proper treatment. And I have to say, I feel like we're in trouble as a species. God help us as a species if there are so many people who don't understand intentions, who conflate the gleeful, premeditated murder that Hamas commits with the unintended killing that the actions of the IDF result in. God help us if there are so many college students that cannot tell the difference. If they are smart enough to write essays or smart enough to get AI to write the essays for them and not smart enough to understand this distinction, we're in a lot of trouble. And God help us that there are still people out there who believe that Hamas are freedom-fighting militants, and if only Israel would give more, they would be satisfied. Thankfully, there are people outside of the Jewish community who see clearly the heinous danger of Hamas's intentions and the supporters of Hamas's intentions. And I want to share a few words that I have read, written by a gentleman named Ahmed Fuad al-Khatib. He's a political analyst, born in Gaza City, now lives in San Francisco. And he has been writing about the importance of recognizing Hamas's barbarity and of Palestinians living within and outside of Gaza, recognizing and denouncing it. And here's what he wrote after the most recent heinous events occurred. I feel immense shame and pain seeing the barbarism that Hamas and a slew of terror organizations put on in Gaza, the depravity of armed men thinking it's courageous to parade the bodies of literal toddlers and their mother as some trophy for victory, the sickness, evil, and stupidity required to believe that marching with a locked coffin of an 83-year-old peace activist who did so much for Gazans is somehow good for the Palestinian cause. I'm ashamed of any Palestinian who supports or justifies this. I'm ashamed of any pro-Palestinian activists, journalists, experts, he puts in quotes, who are going out of their way to whitewash this and blame Israeli bombardment for killing Israeli hostages without blaming Hamas for taking the hostages in the first place. What transpired today isn't just illegal, immoral, vile, and disgusting. It is a matter of, to me and to many who aspire to have a Palestine worth fighting for, it is a matter of values and principles. It's imperative for all Palestinians of conscience, even if they're furious at Israel for what it did to Gaza after October 7th, to speak out and say, not in our name. And then he says, Gaza is not Hamas despite the terror group's control. I have seen dozens of Palestinians in the Strip condemning what took place today and denouncing the inhumanity of Hamas. Dozens is not enough. He recognizes that. I mention him because his is a voice calling out the truth, recognizing that the intentions are murderous and barbaric for Israel, of course, and also ultimately for the Palestinian people. And in the spirit of understanding intentions, I want to share with you a statement by an Israeli writer. Her name is Sarah Tuttle Singer. She's not happy with the current Israeli prime minister. She said a lot of things critical of him and of the government. She says, I'm no fan of the prime minister. I feel the war is dragged on for far too long. I have plenty of rage at the government, but I will never lose sight of this. The ones ultimately responsible for the murder of Shiri, Ariel, Kfir, Oded, Hirsch, and every other hostage slain in Gaza, and the terrorists of Hamas and those who enabled are the terrorists of Hamas and those who enable them. I do not believe in blind unity. As Jews, we're taught to question our leaders. It's in our DNA. But today of all days, let's not forget who brought this suffering upon us, the ones who burned our people alive, the ones who butchered families in their homes, the ones who dragged our brothers and sisters into the dark, Hamas and their supporters. They are the devils, and our rage belongs to them, and our love belongs to each other, even when we disagree, even when we argue, especially then, our love belongs to each other. I just want us to absorb that. If we are getting angrier at each other than we are at the actual perpetrators, boy, oh boy, are we missing the point. And she's here to remind us of that. All of us sitting in this room, we may have different views about what should happen next. our love for each other has to ultimately transcend our hate for those who are perpetuating these barbarous acts again and again. I want to conclude by describing a portion of the ceremony that took place in Hostage Square as these coffins were being brought back to Eretz Yisrael. There were many people there. There was no celebration of dead Palestinians. There was no calling out for murder. Instead, Omer Adam, the very well-known Israeli singer, was leading the people present in a beautiful song by the Israeli legend Chava Alberstein. And the song is called Rikba Enoshit Achat, which means one human fabric. He sang that song with the families of those who were murdered at the Nova Festival, and he sang it recently in Hostage Square. I'm just going to sing the first part of it. It's so beautiful and so haunting, and you'll look it up on YouTube. Listen to him singing it and listen to Chava Alberstein singing it. Kshe'amut mashehu mimeni yamut becha. When I die, something of me will die in you. When you die, something of you in me will die with you, Ki chulanu, ken chulanu, kulanu rikma enoshit achat chaya. For all of us, yes, all of us, are one living human fabric. And if one of us leaves, then something dies in all of us. Not to mention that the song wasn't about murder. The song was about life. Song was about the interconnectedness that we have. The song resonates for these delicious souls of two little boys who will always be connected to us, and their mother who will always be connected, and an octogenarian peace activist who tried his best, who will always be connected, and all of the people who were murdered, who will always be connected and part of the human fabric. But you know who's not part of the human fabric? Hamas and those who support them. They have chosen again and again to place themselves outside of the human fabric. And so I want to conclude my thoughts this morning with a few questions. I have questions that I want to raise, especially to the children in Gaza who were brought to witness this barbarism. My questions are for them, and I hope that they'll be able to internalize these questions and take responsibility for the answers to these questions. My questions are, do you want to align yourself with barbarity, or do you want to be part of the human fabric? What are your intentions?